now.
Well, hello and welcome. My name is Louie Lujan. I am the Government Affairs Director with the Greater Downey Association of Realtors. And I'm here today to give a presentation on Senate Bill 9 and 10, which were recently passed and signed into law. And they have quite an effect on the real estate industry. We've been receiving a lot of questions. So we felt that it would be good to give a little bit of an overview on what Senate Bill 9 and 10 do, because they are similar, but there are some key differences as well. At the bottom, you'll see my contact information, including my cell phone number. Feel free to reach out if there are any questions or anything of concern with regard to Senate Bill 9 and 10. We'd be more than happy to answer your questions. So with that, I'd like to start by giving a general overview on what exactly are SB 9 and 10. Now, of course, these are bills that were passed as part of a greater housing package, but Senate Bill 9 and Senate Bill 10 basically do two different and specific things. First of all, like I said, the governor signed this into law. And essentially what they do is they ease the state's housing shortage by addressing issues of zoning and allowing for people in different communities essentially to build more units on a single lot. Now, one important thing to express here and to share is that it is not a free pass for anybody to go and start building on their lot. What SB 9 and 10 do essentially are establish new rules for local governments to take into account if they want to allow for certain density increases and certain types of lot splits and other things that in the past would have been nearly impossible. So again, SB 9 and 10 simply allows cities to make it easier to rezone and easier to increase density. So let's start with SB 9, and you're going to notice as we go through these slides, there's some graphics that are attached to each slide that will kind of give you an idea as to what the particular bill we're talking about at the time does. So just know that the graphics that you see are related to that particular slide and bill. So first of all, SB 9, the California Housing Opportunity and More Efficiency Act, or HOME Act. So beginning in January 2022, what this act does is it streamlines the process for property owners of parcels zoned for single families to split their lot in two. Essentially, that means that beginning in 2022, if you have a certain type of single family lot, single family home with or single family lot with a home on it, you can go down to City Hall and get a streamlined approval process if your lot and property meet certain criteria to split your lot in half. And if you recall, in certain cities, including Downey, this has been a hot button issue, but not necessarily because it's a political type of issue, but more so because even if somebody wanted to do it, it would have been nearly impossible. Well, SB 9 addresses that and makes it a lot easier by streamlining the process. Again, there's a graphic there on the right-hand side, and it gives you two representations. On the left-hand side there, it gives you an example that someone split their lot north-south, if you will, and on the right-hand side, an example of somebody that would have split their lot east-west or lengthwise in that particular example. Again, you can do it either way if your lot meets certain criteria. Okay, so how do lot splits qualify for under SB 9? In other words, you know what you can do under SB 9 now. How would my lot, if I had one, qualify? What if I wanted to split my lot in half? What do I need to do? And this will give you a little bit of an idea as to how cities are going through the process. So first of all, one of the most important things I want to mention is that your lot must be located in a single family residential zone, so an R1 zone. So if you're in an R2, an R3, R5, or whatever it may be, anything other than an R1, SB 9 does not, you do not qualify under SB 9, in other words, to split your lot. This is only for single family zones. Another one that I always like to share, and I'm bouncing around a little bit here, is that the property owner must occupy one of the units that you plan to build on your split lot for at least 3 years. And those are consecutive years. You cannot, stay there for a month and then 12 months and then wait another. It has to be 3 consecutive years. So that's extremely important. Another one is that the lot split must result in 2 parcels of approximately equal area. In other words, you can't split your lot, 75-25. It has to be pretty even. And that, of course, it makes sense. But what they're trying to avoid is people splitting their lot just for the sake of qualification of SB9 and then, jamming another unit or two into a smaller lot. So keep that in mind. And then finally, one of the items I always like to point out here is it's much more overarching, but all of your proposals must be reviewed by the planning and zoning department at your local city. You can't just split your lot and assume that because you've split it and because you qualify that you're going to get approved. There still is an approval process. Keep that in mind. Okay, so there are certain prohibitions against local government and officials under SB9. So first of all, denying a development application unless a finding can be made that the proposed project would have a specific adverse impact on public health and safety or the physical environment, and there are no feasible and satisfactory mitigation options. In other words, the local government, City Hall, cannot deny you an application or deny your plans just because. There has to be a finding. And I get that question all the time, well, I think my lot will qualify. What are the chances of me going down to City Hall and getting it denied just because? That can't happen under SB9, and keep that in mind. So long as your plans meet all of the local requirements and that you do follow all the guidelines of the city's rules as well as SB9's rules. And also, one of the things that is really important to keep in mind, cities cannot impose additional rules on you. That would be the last bullet point there. They can't come along and say, okay, well, your plan looks good, you qualify under SB9, you're in a single family zone, all of those other bullet points from the previous slide. Once you meet all those criteria, they cannot just come across and say, well, now you have to do this, or now you have to meet that standard. Once you meet the standards, you're pretty much good to go. So that's important to keep in mind what the limitations of local government are under SB9 as well. Okay, so what conditions may be required by a local government under a split like this? In other words, let's say you want to do it, and what might they require you in addition to anything that we already talked about? And for example, easements required for the provision of public services and facilities. So for example, if your proposal in any way, shape, or form may hinder an ambulance from getting down the street, or block off the sidewalk, which is bullet point number 2 there, access for each lot to public right of way. Anything that is going to infringe upon the access of public services, emergency services, or the public right of way would be good enough reason for local government to require you to alter the plans. They can't outright cancel them, but they can work with you to alter them. And also keep in mind, it's only limited to residential use. One person did ask me recently whether or not they can split their lot and look into it for a dispensary. Well, no, because it's it's not for residential use, but also because you cannot have a dispensary in a residential zone. Okay, let's talk about SB10, because now that you understand Senate Bill 9, SB9, which has to do essentially with zoning and the process under which to split your lot, SB10 is related, but it's almost like a cousin of SB9, and it has a lot more to do with zoning and specifically with density. So let's talk about how that works and what you can expect. To the right there, you're going to see a little graphic I placed in there that's San Francisco, and I liked the San Francisco example because they have so many clusters of colors there that represent different zones. I felt it was good representation. So first of all, SB10 empowers local governments to pass an ordinance to zone any parcel for up to 10 residential units if it is located in a certain type of transit-rich or urban infill area. So what does that mean? Essentially, it means this, that now local governments can look to increase density or increase housing units in areas that before they wouldn't be able to do it for multiple reasons. Now, another thing I want to have you keep in mind about SB10 is that SB10 is really geared not necessarily for R1 zones. These are for zones that are more along transit routes, downtown areas, again, which is why I use the San Francisco example, areas that are already considered dense to begin with. This would allow for higher buildings, for example, and other means of building more dense projects around transit-rich areas. Okay, so what are the requirements to be met under SB10 for rezoning? Again, this bill has to do with rezoning. There's some right there. Let me start with the last one. The project must meet local objective design criteria, local impact fees, local height and setback limits, and local demolition standards. In other words, there are very tight criteria that a project must meet, that a developer must propose to a city before they can just start building high rises, because essentially that's what this concern and this slide deals with, is the concern that, hey, now that SB 10 passed, I already live in the downtown area, and I may wake up a year from now and see a bunch of high rises around me. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Again, these are for very specific types of areas under very specific type of criteria. So keep in mind, this gives cities, it empowers them rather to increase density, but it does not just give them a free pass. Similar to SB 9, where a resident must apply and meet certain criteria, well, so must the cities, if a developer approaches them, must also meet certain criteria. And here's some of them right there. And the most important part on this slide, beyond what I just said, is that this is really geared towards the transit-rich areas. So areas that are near bus stops, train depots, so forth and so on. So what prohibits projects from being approved under SB 10? Are located within a high fire zone. We can obviously come up with reasons as for why that would be. Number 3 down there requires demolition of rent-controlled units. I like to skip to that one because someone did ask me the other day, well, now that rent control is state law, does this mean that my building will get demolished and another developer can come in and just build a higher, more dense unit and charge more? And the answer is no, that if any plans involve demolition, they better not involve rent-controlled units, because the law won't allow for them. Also, number 5, local restrictions enacted by local initiative, unless overturned by 2/3 a vote of the legislative body, the city council, for example, that also is a restriction. So you cannot, if there's already a restriction in place, unless that restriction is overturned by 2/3 of the vote of the council, you cannot use that as an approval, or the other way around, depending on how you're thinking about it, if you're the developer or the council. But either way, the point of this slide, again, is that there are conditions under which proposals by developers would not be approved. Again, it's not just a free pass for council and the city to come in and start building more dense projects, nor is it a free pass for developers to come in and start proposing them. It just allows, SB 10 does, allows for clearer rules and regulations and processes, if you will. So how does this bill, as well as SB 9, combat California's growing housing crisis? The main question I get all the time is SB 9 and SB 10 are great, but how do they really even address anything? All they seem to do is enact more rules and regulations. And to a degree that is true. However, you must keep in mind that prior to SB 9 and SB 10, there really were no rules. There were no guidelines. I mean, there were, but they were very vague, if you will. Some of them were very gray. Some of them made it very difficult to even consider more density, consider lot splitting. So what they do is they enable the cities to zone for smaller, lower cost housing that is affordable. Also, it allows more people to access high opportunity neighborhoods, those that are in transit rich areas, for example, and be able to live there for a lower cost of living. So essentially, in the past, you wouldn't be able to say move into a downtown area because you could be priced out. Well, SB 9 and 10, specifically 10 in this case, try to deal with that. And also, SB 9 and SB 10 tried to allow some language in there that would give local governments the ability to maintain control. That was a big issue to California's cities for obvious reasons. They don't necessarily want the state to come in and tell them how to do things or what should be done. They want a certain amount of local control, and that's understandable. And SB 10 specifically, I believe, does a good job at that. I think the language in its best attempt tries to strike a balance between state power, if you will, and local control. And finally, that's pretty much all we have on SB 9 and 10. I want to scroll back to the beginning here so that if anybody does have any questions about SB 9 and how it may affect you and your local city, or SB 10, perhaps you're thinking of proposing a development to a city, let us know. Again, my contact information is at the bottom along with our website, and we would be more than happy to answer any questions, give you the presentation, or whatever it may be. Again, thank you for your time. My name is Louie Lujan. I'm the Government Affairs Director with the Greater Downey Association of Realtors, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you.